It's the fat ship.
So recently, I saw a Nigerian online say she had the flu. And that sounds normal, but Nigerians don't really say that. Yes, obviously, influenza exists in Nigeria, but I'm talking about the language she used. Because normally, here, if someone has headache, fever, body ache, we'll just say it's malaria. What struck me was that nothing she said was wrong. In fact, flu probably communicated the idea better. Most people online would immediately understand what she meant. I gather the lady used flu instead of malaria because of the nature of our audience. Initial symptoms of a severe malaria often mimic the symptoms of a flu, and the commonness of malaria similar to the commonness of the flu in some parts of the world. So I can see where a parallel is drawn to use a widely understood word to describe or replace a locally relevant one. I get it. Like, imagine someone from a local environment trying to explain their experience to millions of people on the internet. Naturally, they'll start choosing the version of their experience that is most globally understood rather than speaking in ways that might feel too local, too specific, too complicated. So instead of it's probably malaria, it becomes I have the flu. But it begs the question, if everyone from all over the world adopts the internet's language and mannerisms when they come online, how much of a culture, how much of your culture are we really seeing? Are we actually seeing cultures as they are offline? Or are we seeing cultures translated into the internet's language first? In Nigeria, malaria is not just an illness. It's the reason your mother shouts at you for leaving the door open. It's the medicine permanently sitting somewhere in the house. It's the question people ask whenever you have a fever. It's so ordinary that everyone jokes about it, and it's the illness that some people in rural areas still die from this illness. That's the thing about words. They don't just describe reality, they carry pieces of it. The word malaria doesn't just tell you what illness I might have. It communicates to you about where we live, about what we worry about, what we joke about the things we've learned to adapt to, It's entwined with our memories, our childhood. But when someone replaces it with flu for a global audience, communication becomes smoother. Sure, meaning is conveyed, but we're sacrificing context, culture, identity, and throwing away the world behind the word. The internet gives us an unprecedented access to other cultures, but it can also create the illusion that we understand other cultures more deeply than we actually do. We see the clothes, the food, the music, but a culture is also built from the invisible realities, the common illnesses, the everyday habits, the unspoken assumptions, the phrases that need no explanation. These things are harder to export globally because they require too much context. So people simplify them. And because these simplifications happen constantly on the internet, people mistake exposure for understanding. You know the food, you know the slangs, the jokes, and now you start feeling close to places you've never experienced physically, which is beautiful in some ways. But knowing the symbols of a culture isn't the same as living inside it. And sometimes we don't realize the difference until we arrive in that country. So when outsiders finally visit the country, they experience culture shock. Even after consuming content from that country for years, the culture and its people still feel strange to them. There's still a world of things they don't understand. And I think this is why physical presence still matters so much, because being physically present in a place gives you access to a completely different layer of reality. You can know malaria exists in Nigeria, but not know what it feels like to sit outside at night because you've just fleeted the entire house. Those things are very hard to absorb through a screen, and a lot of culture exists in things people do not think to present online because they don't even realize that those things are cultural. You know, with all these translation happening, I wonder whether we're starting to create two versions of culture. There's the culture that exists offline, and then there's the version of that culture that is optimized for the internet. The version that's easier to explain, easier to export, and for millions of people around the world, that version is the version of the culture they will ever encounter. The question I have now is, what if the internet version does not stay on the internet? What if it comes back and changes the original? Take something like jollof rice. I've seen food creators create jollof rice and receive comments from people around the world saying there's too much oil, or asking why certain ingredients are used, or suggesting changes that better suit their taste. And because creators naturally respond to their audience, they adapt. They make other recipes that use less oil, change ingredients, they tweak the recipe to make it more appealing or palatable to the foreign tastes, palates. Now imagine this happening hundreds of times. Eventually, that adapted version becomes the version that most people outside of the culture recognize. For them, that is jollof rice. So when some of them finally visit Nigeria and taste the real thing, suddenly they're confused. This doesn't taste like the jollof rice I know. What? What jollof rice do you know? Like, this is the jollof rice. This is the real thing. This is the original. But if enough people prefer the translated version, restaurants, creators, businesses may eventually adapt to meet those expectations. And at that point, the translation is no longer describing the culture, it's beginning to shape it. Now, cultures have never been static. As time passes, every generation inherits a culture, and they change it to fit the time they're in. And every culture has always been shaped by outside influences: trade, migration, colonization, globalization. So we can say the internet is simply one of the newest force on that list. But unlike those forces, the internet creates versions of cultures, versions that can travel farther than the original ever could. And the longer those versions circulate, the harder it becomes to tell where the translation ends and the culture begins, or the harder it becomes to even tell what the actual culture is. At what point does a translation stop being a translation and becomes the thing itself? I think we're living through the answer right now. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out other videos in the catalog. You might just find something that speaks to you. Until next time, my name is Mariam Fat.